Okay, this is the wall plaque from Oba's palace. It was created by the Edo peoples, EDO, and they were largely located around Benin, Benin, or closely around Nigeria. This dates from the 16th century CE. It is made out of cast brass. The height is about 19 and a half inches, and this piece in particular is currently in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and I'll show you a couple pictures of it in a few minutes. Okay, so for context, Benin is in southwest Africa, so we're talking about the other side of the continent than we were with Great Zimbabwe. It is south of the Sahara Desert and south of Mali. Benin developed cordial relations or good relations with Portugal in 1485 and began an active trade between the two areas. They first traded in ivory and forest products, but then switched to slaves as that proved to be more profitable. Benin flourished until 1897 when, in reprisal for a massacre of a party of trade negotiators, the British sacked and burned the royal palace, sending the Oba, or fourth king, into exile, which lasted until 1914. Anyone want to guess why that ended in 1914? Well, if you haven't guessed, it's because that's the year World War I broke out and Britain had other things to do. So the palace was later rebuilt, and the present-day Oba continues the dynasty. When the British got there between 1897 up till 1914, they discovered shrines to deceased Obas covered with brass heads, bells, and figures. They also found wooden rattles and enormous ivory tusks carved with images of kings, court attendants, and even 16th century Portuguese soldiers. Now, the British appropriated these items, or just took them because it was considered war booty, and made no effort to know which head and plaque came from a particular shrine. That's important because there was a chronology to it before they came in. When they came in, they just started grabbing everything and destroyed evidence that would have helped archaeologists determine age of the heads and the chronology for the evolution of the Benin style. Most of the booty was in the form of Benin heads, together with other objects, were originally placed on a semicircular platform or altar and surmounted by large elephant tusks. Elephant tusks is symbolic of power. Benin brass heads range from small, thinly cast to lifelike and large and thickly cast and highly stylized heads. Heads have been organized into three periods. The early period from 1400 to 1550 were the smallest and most naturalistic, with only a few strands of beads. The middle period lasted from 1550 to 1700. The heads were heavier, increasingly stylized, and strands of beads increased in number until they concealed the chin. And then the late period goes from 1700 to 1897, and the heads are very large, heavy with angular stylized features, elaborate beaded crowns, and numerous necklaces forming a tall cylindrical mass. Broad horizontal phalanges or projecting edges bearing small images cast in low relief ring the base of the late period heads. The increase in size and weight of the memorial heads over time reflect the growing power and the wealth flowing to the Oba from Benin's expanding trade with Europe. As Portugal slowly receded from the trade and Britain came along by the late period, that's going to see a big difference in what they were trading and with whom. About 900 plaques and heads survive and are in many European museums, and the United States has quite a few too. Well, this piece in particular that we're looking at, it dates from 1550 to 1680, and it depicts an Oba, the king. It also depicts his attendants from the Benin Empire, located in modern-day Nigeria. At the time of this piece, the Benin Kingdom had grown in size and prosperity due to its participation in the trans-Saharan trade routes and then trade with the Portuguese. Artistic production at this time responded to refinement in metallurgical technology and an intensified use of symbolic emblems of kingship. We know it's an Oba because he has a distinctive coral beaded regalia. Attendants also hold shields above his head, either to protect him from attack or the sun, and only the Oba got that. The figures are hierarchical scale, and that shows the relative importance of the attendants. Okay, the Oba is seated in the center right here. So let me get my pointer. He's in the center, which again reflects the importance. And notice that he is seated. Side saddle. Side saddle means both feet on one side. So you see here's the horse's head, and then there's both his feet. So it looks kind of awkward because his hips don't reflect the twisting of the body. So that's hard to show naturalistically. But he is shown side saddle. And he's the largest figure, emphasizing power and authority. So another thing about the full coral bead regalia, it also includes a high collar of stacked necklaces and a crown of beads. All coral beads were owned by the Oba because it came from the sea. It is associated with the god of the sea, and so anything that was made from coral was considered the Oba's. Almost every detail in this piece shows mutual benefits of trade with Portugal. There are rosette shapes that you can see in the top. These rosette shapes show Portuguese artistic reflection in this piece in the background, and that could be possibly derived from the Christian crosses brought by the Europeans. And then, of course, the horse that the Oba is sitting on is from Europe. So we're seeing this cross-cultural connection between the Benin people and the Portuguese. The art of Benin was only for the royals, the royal art. Only the Oba could commission works in brass. Brass is important because it is an alloy of copper and zinc, which is scarce and costly. The durability of the metal was fitting because it was intended to be a lasting tribute to the greatness of the Benin king. There is a shiny gold surface of polished brass, and that was considered beautiful and intimidating, but it's also a source of symbolic of royal power. The artisans were organized into guilds. They lived in a separate part of the city, so they weren't included. They were, highly trained and then considered separate from the rest of society. The brass pieces were created using lost wax casting. You need to know what that means, so make sure that you can describe what lost wax casting means. And these pieces were not duplicated because the molds are destroyed in the process when you use lost wax. Okay, so I've got a few other pictures. Well, first of all, this is the modern day Oba, and you can see the coral. See how it's stacked, the coral necklaces that go throughout his beads. You could see the headdress up here. That's all made out of coral that has come out of the ocean on the western side of Africa. Notice attendants have coral beads, and notice how the similarities with holding up some type, of shield right here as the Oba is walking. That highly reflects what we're seeing here with the Oba in the center. That's supposed to be representative of all the different beads of coral, and then the headdress around. So uh, this is a modern day picture of something that happened from this time period. By the way, after 1914, the Oba was reestablished, and even though many of their treasures were looted, their practices still lived on. Here's me in the Met, and I didn't, when I went there, I didn't exactly know um, that this specific piece was there until I walked through the African section of the Met. But if you look at the size compared to me, it's not as large as maybe you would think. So I know I give you guys the inches or the feet or whatever the sizes are, but it's always good to see what it is in relative terms because it gives the idea of scale. So here's sort of the close-up of it. Um, I've got a shiny reflection because it's encased in, I don't think it's glass. It might be some type of plastic, not sure. But behind it are different examples of the Oba brass plaques, the ones that you don't need to know. But remember, when they're choosing these pieces, they're trying to choose the one that are either the most symbolic or the most important of the pieces. And so that's why you are studying this one. So that will be it for the plaque from Oba's Palace.